Welcome to our course Modern Motion. Get ready to explore 3D in After Effects. We'll create visuals that blend 2D and 3D elements. By the end, you'll master techniques and create a professional promotional video from scratch. Let's explore the new 3D features in After Effects. It's come a long way from just 2D animation and now can handle full 3D scenes without needing extra plugins. After Effects has a rich history with 3D. Now we can import and work with full 3D models, apply realistic lighting, and create depth that was once only possible in dedicated 3D software. This opens exciting possibilities for motion designers, allowing for dynamic and engaging visuals. But there is more. We'll be adding Blender to our toolkit. It's free, powerful, and the materials we created in Blender work perfectly with After Effects. It fills gaps where After Effects' native 3D capabilities might not meet our needs. By adding Blender to our workflow, we gain access to advanced modeling and texturing tools that enhance our After Effects projects without extra hard steps. Blender is a solid modeling tool. It may seem tricky at first, but it's worth the effort. This course focused on key Blender features for a quick start. We'll tackle specific tasks relevant to our projects. After creating models in Blender, we'll import them into After Effects for animation and compositing. Here's where the magic happens. We're not just creating 3D animations, we're crafting something truly unique. Look development is the blend of modeling, texturing, lighting, and compositing to create your own visual style. Look development is like styling your animation. You're deciding how everything will look from the textures to the lighting. After Effects is great at compositing and post-production. We'll use this strength to enhance our 3D work, adding depth and atmosphere that makes professional work stand out. The synergy between Blender and After Effects enable us to produce rich, detailed visuals. Handling 3D scenes in After Effects can be tough on your computer. Don't worry, we'll cover how to keep your workflow smooth and cut down on render times. You'll learn tricks to manage big projects while still keeping your 3D elements looking sharp. To ignite our creativity and explore visual styles, we need a strong base of concepts and illustrations. We've looked into various styles and gathered mood boards for inspiration. Managing everything alone can be challenging, especially when aiming for a unique style. That's why we've collaborated with the talented illustrator Renaud Levency. Renaud has crafted a series of unique illustrations that we'll animate in 3D. We've gathered 6 illustrations and will find ways to integrate them into the promo video. Teamwork is essential in the creative process. It helps you grow and learn from others. Throughout this course, we'll provide all the necessary source files. After completing the course, you'll have the tools to realize your unique ideas building on the foundation we've established together. Our challenge is to recreate Renaud's complex style in 3D, using After Effects' powerful compositing features. It's not just about making things look 3D. It's about capturing Renaud's artistic vision and translating it into motion. Let's walk through our process. Our team began with a frame-by-frame draft animation, or animatic. This approach helped us set the overall direction without getting lost in details. It's a key step in planning, allowing us to focus on timing, composition, and movement without distractions. Don't worry if you are not a skilled illustrator. The goal is to capture ideas and movement, not to create polished artwork. This process is about experimenting with concepts and discovering creative possibilities without the pressure of technical perfection. This method helps us move beyond the limitations of digital tools, allowing us to focus on the main idea. Whether you're doodling simple shapes in a notebook or using a tablet to sketch rough outlines, hand drawing is crucial for brainstorming and visualizing the flow of our animation. These early sketches don't need to be detailed with textures or lighting. Instead, they focus on basic shapes and movements, setting the stage for more intricate work later. By starting with simple forms, we capture the essence of the animation before adding complexity. Next, we created a draft animation using basic 3D shapes. This step provided precise timing and a solid foundation for our more complex work. By using simple 3D shapes with draft textures, we began to see how our 2D concepts will translate into a 3D space. This stage allows us to refine our timing, test different camera angles, and experiment with basic lighting setups. Finally, we polished everything. We added detailed models, materials, and fine-tuned animations. This takes time, but achieves the necessary detail. The result? A capturing promo video blending 2D and 3D elements. It demonstrates the power of combining Blender and After Effects in one workflow. This project unfolds across 6 lessons, each spotlighting a unique scene and introducing fresh techniques. We'll begin with simple concepts, gradually layering in complexity. This way, you'll establish a solid base before diving into advanced ideas. Initially, we'll break down complex topics. With your foundational knowledge in place, we'll guide you through each step clearly. As we move forward, we'll revisit earlier topics, allowing you to refine past animations with new insights. By the end, you'll possess the skills to polish the entire video, transforming it into a professional promotional piece. The production stages will be different from what we worked on. Overall, it takes more than 100 hours to explore ideas, try different ways to work, and polish everything. We will keep it as simple as possible and aim to produce great animations in each lesson without needing to wait until the end of the course. Now, let's set up our project. We'll create our main composition, import our assets, and organize everything for a smooth workflow. Think of After Effects as your workspace where you bring everything together, and Blender as the tool where you shape the pieces. Ensure you're using After Effects version 24.1 or later. This version features the advanced 3D engine, allowing direct import of 3D files like OBJ, GLTF, and GLB formats. These capabilities are essential for our workflow, enabling seamless integration between Blender and After Effects. Begin by creating a new empty project in After Effects. If the interface feels unfamiliar, don't worry, we'll guide you through it. Picture the After Effects interface as a customizable workspace, similar to arranging tools on a desk. You can move panels by dragging their titles, group them into tabs, or close them entirely. Organize them in a way that feels comfortable. To avoid reconfiguring panels each time, save your preferred layout as a preset through the Window, Workspace, Save as New Workspace menu. You can also select pre-made presets in the top panel. For this course, we'll start with the standard workspace to keep things tidy. If your panels don't match mine, reset them to their original layout by navigating to Window, Workspace, Reset to Saved Layout. We'll maintain a clear interface, free of unnecessary panels, allowing us to focus on our project without distractions. For this course, I've prepared 2 layouts, classic horizontal and vertical, for when we'll work with many layers, effects, and properties. Next, let's set up a basic project. Organizing your project is like creating folders on your computer. It helps you find things quickly. Click the folder icon on the project panel to create new folders. We'll create a few starter folders to keep things organized. The Assets folder will store all the elements we'll use. The Refs folder will hold our illustration files and draft videos for inspiration. The Precoms folder will be where we work on individual scenes and objects before bringing them together. Finally, the Outputs folder will store the final polished videos. This structure will help you locate specific elements as we progress. While the structure will become more complex later, we'll keep it simple and organized for now. Let's create our main composition, which will serve as a central hub for our promo video. Compositions in After Effects are containers where we draw, animate, and arrange files or other compositions. To create a new composition, click on the New Composition icon in the project panel or use the keyboard shortcut Ctrl+N, Command+N on Mac. We'll frequently use keyboard shortcuts to speed up our workflow. In the Open It window, name your composition Modern Motion Main for clarity. While underscores aren't strictly necessary, they are recommended for project folders as these names will be used for output files. Using underscores helps avoid issues with spaces in file names across different software and operating systems. Set the frame rate of your composition to 15 frames per second. While 15 FPS may not be as commonly used as 24, 25, or 30 FPS, it offers a distinct cartoon-style feel. This frame rate balances smooth motion with a slightly choppy static, reminiscent of traditional hand-drawn animations. For this goal, it could range from 8 to 15 FPS, but more often it is 12 FPS. So why 15? Our friend and master motion designer Emmanuel Colombo frequently uses this frame rate in his projects, appreciating how it enhances visual storytelling and overall feel. 15 FPS strike a balance between smoothness and stylization. It's smooth enough to avoid jerkiness, but has enough bite to give the animation texture. Set the resolution to Full HD. 1920 pixels for width, and 1080 pixels for height. Currently, we often use resolutions between Full HD and 4K. While 4K is even better because it's 2 times larger, adding more details and providing better high-resolution displays, Full HD offers a smooth balance between quality and performance, making it ideal for most professional projects without overwhelming your computer's processing power. The higher the resolution, the longer it takes to render. Working with 3D requires more power from your computer, so we want to ensure all students can render their animations without significant delays. Set the composition duration to 26 seconds, which we've found optimal for this project, including 6 scenes with transitions. After configuring these settings, click OK to create the composition. Another important settings for our project is color depth. Open Project Settings by navigating to File, Project Settings, and select the Color tab, or click the corresponding button in the project panel. Enable 16-bit color for your project. This setting allows for smoother gradients and more nuanced color transitions, essential for achieving a polished and professional look. While increasing the bit depth may slightly slow down rendering, the enhanced color fidelity is worth the trade-off. If you encounter performance issues, you can try reducing the color depth to 8-bit, but 16-bit is generally preferable for higher quality. Let's import our illustrations and draft animations. Double-click in the project panel or press Ctrl+I, Command+I on Mac to open the file browser. Select the files from the project folder and click Open to import them. Place them in the Refs folder for easy access. Next, we'll add these assets to the timeline as layers. Think of layers as transparent sheets stacked on top of each other, each holding a different part of your animation. Select the files and drag them into the timeline or viewer. You'll see only the topmost layers at first, but we'll learn to work with all of them. To move layers in the viewport, use the Selection tool. Click and drag the layer to reposition it. To scale a layer, drag the corner of the bounding box while holding the Shift key to maintain proportions. For rotation, press the W key to activate the rotation tool. Then click and drag to rotate the layer around its center. You can adjust position, scale, and rotation more precisely using layer properties. Click the arrow next to the layer name in the timeline to unfold its transform properties. Here you can change values by typing numbers directly, or by clicking and dragging left or right for interactive adjustments. To see the entire timeline, adjust the Time Navigator elements on both ends of the timeline panel. Initially, all layers' durations match the composition duration. To change this, drag the start or end of the layers directly in the timeline. For precise control, use shortcuts like the left and right square bracket keys to move layers and holding Alt plus square brackets to trim layers at the start or end. The split command Ctrl-Shift-D allows you to cut layers at specific timings, essential for interesting transitions or adjusting scenes. To keep your work organized, name your layers descriptively. Click on the layer, press Enter, and rename it to something meaningful like Background, Scene 1, or Text Overlay. You can also assign color labels to layers by clicking the color switch next to the layer name, selecting a color from the Label submenu, and choosing a color that helps you visually differentiate layers. Toggle layer visibility by clicking the eye icon next to the layer in the timeline. This helps set exact timing for each scene and provides a guideline for further work. You can also use the solo switch to isolate and view a single layer, making it easier to focus on specific elements. To preview your work, press the space bar to play and pause the composition preview. This lets you see your animations in real time and make necessary adjustments. These basic actions will be used throughout our project, and we'll explore more details in upcoming lessons. Now we can split the draft video into scenes. Place the illustrations over the draft video to see them appear sequentially. Toggle the visibility of the layers by clicking the eye icon next to each layer in the timeline. This will help you set the exact timing for each scene and guide our further work. In the Done folder, I prepared a completed composition for you to compare with your work. Remember to save your work regularly. Use Ctrl-C or Command-C on Mac to save frequently. Also consider enabling autosave in Settings, Autosave, to back up your work at regular intervals. At this point, we have our illustrations and draft videos imported into the project. We've prepared the main composition, set the project settings, and organized the layers. These basic actions form the foundation of working in After Effects. So it's crucial to become comfortable with them early in your journey. Before we finish, let's quickly review the scripts and extensions we will use to streamline our workflow. Why do we need them? Firstly, as a course for beginners, we will explain everything from scratch. After some practice, we will start to automate most of the tasks to avoid repeating ourselves. This is one of the greatest rules for growth. It saves our time and allows us to focus on the creative aspects of our work. We'll explore them in more detail later, but for now it's important to know how to set them up. Motion Tools Pro is our key extension for After Effects. It will help us animate faster using advanced techniques that are quite boring to do manually. It's hard to imagine working in After Effects without additional scripts, as they remove limitations and free up time for refining details. We'll primarily use this one to avoid installing multiple scripts. To install Motion Tools Pro, download it from the Motion Design School website and use a script installer like ZXP Installer from A-Scripts. We will also provide detailed instructions on the lesson page. After installation, find it under Window, Extensions in After Effects. There are 4 panels for Motion Tools Pro. We'll start with the first panel. Super 3D, a powerful widget included in Motion Tools Pro, enhances After Effects 3D capabilities. It will help to create simple 3D objects just in click, and provides advanced material controls. As students, you'll get the full Pro version for free. You'll find it in the Content settings under the Scripts section. It's large, so consider creating a new layout for it from the drop-down list in the top left corner. Let's set it. Great. To maintain a compact Motion Tools installer, all materials are hosted on our server. Begin by pressing the Download Library button. This process is quick, taking only a few moments, and the download size is approximately 10 to 20 megabytes. If you encounter any issues, there is an option in the settings at the bottom right corner to re-download the core library and install it manually. To activate Super 3D, click the Update button in the top right corner. This will connect to the server and update the list of available scripts and widgets. You should see a notification about Super 3D. Click Install to activate the widget. If the notification doesn't appear, wait a bit longer. Or it might have already been activated in the background. To confirm activation, check the Content settings. In the Scripts section, you should see an image and a Pro tag next to the Super 3D name. To verify, you can reopen the extension or update it. The rest of the material will be available. You can manually download the material by clicking the Download button in the top right corner of each material, or set it to download all models and materials automatically from the settings. For this course, we don't need most of them, we will just use few basic materials. If you run into any issues, reach out to us in the Discord course channel. The Motion Tools Pro interface is customizable. If you have a small screen, it may take up considerable space. To adjust this, click the gear icon in the top right corner to access panel settings. You can modify the cell size and spacing for a more compact interface. While these tools speed up your workflow, learning the manual steps is essential for us and will deepen your understanding of how After Effects handles 3D objects and effects. We'll explore both methods throughout the course, from the basics for beginners to pro-level automation. We'll cover the functionality of these tools, focusing on features relevant to our 3D workflow. Don't worry if it feels overwhelming at first. We'll introduce each feature as needed, building your understanding step by step. That's our introduction to modern 3D in After Effects. We've set the stage by organizing our project, introducing essential tools. In the next video, we'll model our first object, a captivating crystal that will be the centerpiece of our opening scene. See you in the next video. Welcome back. Today we're jumping into Blender to create our first 3D model, a crystal that will shine at the heart of our scene. Don't worry if you are new to 3D modeling. I'll walk you through everything step by step. Blender is a powerful 3D modeling software that works well with After Effects. It might feel overwhelming at first, but we'll focus on the tools and techniques essential for our project. Let's begin by launching Blender. We are using Blender version 4.2, which is a long-term support LTS version. The advantage of using an LTS version is that it offers a stable interface and consistent functionality over time. This stability allows us to focus on our projects without the distraction of frequent software updates, making it perfect for long-term educational projects like ours. When you launch it, you'll see a default scene with a cube, a camera, and a light source. This is your blank canvas, ready for your creativity. Blender's interface might look a bit tricky at first, but we'll break it down into easy sections. Think of it like a digital art studio. with all your tools laid out in different zones. In the center, you'll see the 3D viewport. This is where the magic happens, your main workspace for creating and manipulating 3D models. It's your drafting table where you'll spend most of your time crafting your crystal. On the left, there is a toolbar with tools for selection and transformation. These are your digital sculpting tools, each helping you shape your 3D model in different ways. On the right, you'll see two important panels. The top one is the outliner, listing all objects in your scene. Below that is the Properties panel, where you can adjust settings for your objects. This is where you'll fine-tune the details of your crystal. Now let's discuss moving around in this 3D space. To orbit around the scene, hold down the middle mouse button and move your mouse. If you are using a laptop, use two fingers to orbit. To pan the view, hold down Shift and the middle mouse button, then move your mouse. To zoom in and out, simply scroll the mouse wheel. If you are on a laptop without a good touchpad or lack a middle mouse button, you can enable Emulate 3-button mouse in Preferences under Input. This feature allows you to use key combinations to simulate a 3-button mouse. Take a moment to practice these movements. Getting comfortable with navigation is essential for efficient work in Blender. Remember, there is no rush. Take your time to familiarize yourself with moving around your 3D space. Blender uses a 3-dimensional graph with 3 axes. The x-axis runs left to right, represented by a red line. The y-axis runs front to back, represented by a green line. The z-axis runs up and down, represented by a blue line. You can see these axes in the small gizmo at the top right of the viewport. This helps us keep track of our orientation as we model, ensuring accurate placement and movement of objects. Understanding this axis is crucial because they guide how you move, scale, and rotate your objects. When working on your crystal, you'll often use this axis for precise adjustments. Before we start modeling, it's a good idea to have a reference image. Reference images are like blueprints. They're super useful in 3D modeling. They help you get the size and shape of your model spot on. Let's add a reference image for our crystal. In Blender, go to the Add menu, select Image, and then choose Reference. Or press Shift-A for faster access with the same menu structure. In the window that opens, select your reference image. Using reference images helps maintain correct proportions and ensures your model closely resembles the real-world object. This is a key technique in both professional and hobbyist 3D modeling. The new plane with your image will appear in the center of the scene, rotated to match your view angle. To make it more convenient, reset the object's rotation. In the Properties panel, find the rotation settings and set the X, Y, and Z values to 0. Alternatively, set the X and Z axis to 90 degrees for better orientation along the X and Y axis. You can move, rotate, and scale the reference image like any other object. Press G to grab and move it. R to rotate, and S to scale. After pressing one of these keys, constrain the action to a specific axis by pressing X, Y, or Z. For instance, pressing G, then Z will move the object up and down. A handy trick is to press G and use the middle mouse button. This aligns the movement to the closest axis based on your current view, making precise alignment easier. Feel free to use the Gizmo tool for the selected model. Shortcuts can be uncomfortable at the start, but this is a game changer for your future modeling skills. The earlier we start using shortcuts, the better you will grow as an effective specialist. Let's move the reference image back from the camera to avoid overlap with our crystal. Press G, then X, and move your mouse to push it back. When placing your reference, use orthographic views by pressing the XYZ axis on the gizmo buttons on the top right corner. These flat views remove perspective, making it easier to align your model with the reference. Switch to these views using the numpad keys, 1 for front view, 3 for side view, and 7 for top view. If you don't have a numpad, enable it in the Preferences under the Input tab. Activate the Emulate Numpad option to use the 1 to 0 keys available on all keyboards. Blender has many keyboard shortcuts which can be confusing at first, but once you get used to them, they speed up your workflow and make modeling more efficient. Don't worry if you can't remember them all right away. With practice, they'll become second nature. Now let's begin creating our crystal. We'll start by adding a basic shape and then sculpt it into the form we want. First, let's delete the default cube in the scene to know how to add it from scratch. Click on it to select it. You'll know it's selected when it's outlined in orange. Then press X and confirm to delete. Next, add a new cube. Go to the Add menu, hover over Mesh and select Cube. Alternatively, press Shift-A to open the Add menu. A cube will appear at the center of the scene. When you add the cube, you might notice some settings at the bottom left corner of the viewport. If you expand this panel, you can adjust properties like the size. For example, a cylinder has more options like radius, depth, and number of vertices. This can only be set immediately after adding the object. After clicking somewhere in the interface, the panel will disappear and you won't be able to set it later. Let's look at the outliner. Another important element of it is the collection. Collections are groups of objects that can be used to organize your scene. You can create a new collection by right-clicking in the outliner and selecting New Collection. Double-click on its name and change it to Crystals. This descriptive naming will help us keep track of our objects as our scene grows more complex. This collection will keep our crystal-related objects organized. Drag the cube into the crystals collection. Now for the fun part, shaping our cube into a crystal. Enter Edit mode by pressing Tab or selecting it from the drop-down menu at the top of the viewport. Edit mode is where we modify the geometry of our object. Here we can select and manipulate different components of our model. In 3D modeling, vertices are points in 3D space that define the shape of the model. Edges are the straight lines that connect these vertices. Faces are the flat surfaces enclosed by edges, forming the visible surface of the 3D object. Switch between selecting vertices, edges, or faces using the buttons at the top left of the viewport or by pressing 1 for vertices, 2 for edges, and 3 for faces on the number row, not the numpad. Be careful if you previously enabled the Emulate Numpad option. Now the number keys could be remapped to numpad numbers, and you can switch the modes. For the crystal, we need many more vertices than the default cube has. Here are some basic modeling actions you can perform in edit mode, but later we will use more effective tools for modeling it. In Face Select mode, press 3, click on the top face. Select the Extrude Region tool on the left panel to create new geometry from the selected face. Hold the plus button and move it up to extrude the face in all directions. Extruding is a common technique in 3D modeling, allowing you to create new faces from existing ones. It's a quick way to add geometry to your model. With the Move tool selected, press E to extrude faster. Press S to scale. Move your mouse to create a similar face above the original and click to confirm. Repeat this a few times, gradually scaling down each new face until you have a pointed top. The Inset Faces tool is a powerful feature that allows you to create a new face inside an existing face. This is particularly useful for adding detail to your model without altering the overall shape. When you select a face and use the Inset tool, you can drag invert to create a smaller face that maintains the original face's shape. This can help in creating faces or adding depth to your crystal by combining it with Extrude tool. The Bevel tool is used to soften the edges of your model. Beveling is like smoothing the sharp edges, just like you'd round off the corners of a block of wood. When you select an edge and apply the Bevel tool, shortcut Ctrl+B, you can drag to create a rounded or chamfered edge. This is especially important for crystals, as natural crystals often have smooth, rounded edges rather than sharp ones. You can adjust the width and the number of segments in the Bevel Options panel to control how smooth the bevel appears. The Loop Cut tool is essential for adding more geometry to your model. By pressing Ctrl+R, you can create a loop cut around your model, which adds additional edge loops. This is particularly useful for increasing the detail in specific areas of your model, allowing for more precise shaping and refinement. You can slide the new edge loop along the existing geometry to position it exactly where you need it, enhancing the overall structure of your crystal. We'll explore these tools more in the next lessons. As we shape the crystal, we need to keep what's called clean topology. That just means arranging the vertices, edges, and faces neatly, so everything works well when we animate it later. When modeling, it's best to primarily use 4 side faces, or quads, as they are easier to work with and subdivide more cleanly. Try to avoid creating faces with more than 4 sides, or n-gons, as these can lead to issues with shading and deformation. To add more geometry where needed, utilize the Loop Cut tool instead of stretching existing faces. For moving edges, consider using the Edge Slide technique by selecting an edge and pressing G twice, rather than simply moving it, as this helps maintain the overall structure of your model. Remember, good topology makes your model easier to work with, ensures smooth shading, and allows for easier modifications later on. While it's a complex subject, understanding its basics is valuable at this stage. Don't be afraid to experiment and learn from any mistakes you might make. Let's make our crystal look more natural using the Knife tool. This tool helps us carve edges and create unique facets. In Edit mode, press K to activate the Knife tool. Click on Edge to start your cut, then move your mouse to where you want it to end and click again. You can keep clicking to add more points, shaping your crystal as you go. When you're finished, just press Enter to confirm. You will notice we can cut along the visible edges of the cube, but we can also cut through the faces, which can be easier. Check the Knife tool settings at the bottom of the interface. Press C to cut through the face. If you want to see changes without rotating the camera, turn on the X-ray option in the top right corner. Feel free to create diagonal cuts across faces to mimic the natural facets of a crystal. Don't stress about perfection. Those little irregularities will make your crystal look more realistic. If something seems off, no worries, you can always undo and adjust. For a clearer view while cutting, switch your viewport to orthographic view by toggling from the menu Perspective Orthographics and choosing the desired view. Use 1 for front view, 3 for side view, and 7 for top view. This helps you make more precise cuts. There is no single correct way to cut. I advise starting from the top view. By cutting the square angles, you can make the crystal less symmetric and more natural. After cutting, we need to delete unnecessary faces. Hold down Shift to select multiple faces in Face Select mode. If you select one by mistake, hold Ctrl to deselect it. Press X and choose what to delete from the menu. Cutting and deleting faces can leave holes in your model. To fill a hole, select the surrounding edges or vertices and press F to create a new face. Here is a handy tip. You don't always need to select each edge manually. Hold Alt and click on Edge to make a loop selection. This feature works automatically and speeds up your workflow. In the same way, by selecting the vertices and pressing F, you can create a new edge. This trick could help you decrease the number of vertices on the face. But it's better not to try to create edges over the existing face, as they could create some artifacts. Delete the existing face, then create a new edge by selecting two vertices. Then select the new edges and press F to create a new face. At this moment, this is a simplified modeling workflow. There are many techniques to improve modeling accuracy, but we will focus on just creating and practicing for a fast start. Blender has many tools for modeling, and we'll explore more as we go. Just play around with them and see what you can create. As you make these cuts, think about how real crystals form. They often have irregular shapes, so don't worry about symmetry. Those irregularities will enhance the realism of your model. Try adding cuts at different angles. Create larger facets near the base and smaller ones near the tip. This variation will make your crystal look more natural and interesting. Now that we added cuts to our crystal, let's fine-tune its shape. Switch to vertex selection mode by pressing 1 on the number row. To move a vertex, press G for grab and move your mouse. If you want to limit the movement to a specific axis, press X, Y, or Z after pressing G. For example, pressing G, then Z moves the vertex up or down, the same way like we worked with the whole model. This is useful for maintaining symmetry or aligning vertices. For more controlled movement, use the edge slide function. Select a vertex, press G twice, and the vertex will slide along the connected edges. This helps fine-tune the shape without distorting the overall structure of your crystal. As you refine your crystal's shape, you might end up needing to unite two vertices. Or you might end up with vertices that are very close together or even overlapping. Select the vertices you want to combine, right-click and choose Merge Vertices. Alternatively, press M to open the Merge menu and select at Center to merge them at their average position. Blender also has an auto-merge option for vertices that are very close together. If this feature isn't working as expected, adjust the merge threshold in the Options panel. Here is another cool tip. With Merge Vertices enabled, select the face and scale it to a point by pressing 0 to unite the whole face to a vertex. As you are working, you might notice almost invisible lines over the face of your crystal. These lines are related to how 3D software handles surface smoothing. In 3D modeling, it's generally best to aim for faces with 3 or 4 vertices. This is because 3D software typically works with triangles under the hood, and quads, or 4-sided faces, can be easily split into 2 triangles. Keep your faces as flat as possible. If a face has an angle or a curve, consider splitting into smaller, flatter faces. This ensures your crystal renders smoothly from all angles. Blender has a powerful function to align vertices along an axis. Press S for scale, select an axis, X, Y, or Z, and as you change the scale, the selected vertices will align along that axis. For perfect alignment, press 0 after selecting the axis to flatten the selected vertices completely. This alignment can be tricky for vertices at an angle to the main axis. In such cases, try rotating the whole model along an axis that aligns with the vertices you want to adjust. Repeat this until you achieve the desired result. This method helps create crisp, clean edges for your crystal. As you refine your crystal's shape, don't be afraid to make bold adjustments. Try making some edges sharper for a more raw, natural look. Round off others for a more polished appearance. You could even create a slightly twisted look by carefully rotating some of the facets. The goal is to create a shape that looks natural and interesting, capturing the unique qualities of real crystals. This refinement stage is iterative. I've tried many versions before finding one I liked. Small adjustments can significantly impact the final look, so take your time and experiment. Don't be discouraged if your first attempts don't match your vision. Each attempt improves your skills and understanding. In nature, every crystal is unique, shaped by its environment. Your digital crystal doesn't need to fit a specific shape. Let your creativity guide you and embrace the imperfections and asymmetries that make your model feel authentic and visually interesting. This refinement process showcases your artistic vision. Take your time, be patient, and enjoy bringing your unique crystal to life. Let's discuss origin points. Think of the origin as the center of gravity for our object. It affects how our crystal rotates and scales. To gain better control, we need the origin positioned at the center of our crystal. To set this up, select your object. Navigate to the Object menu, then choose Set Origin and select Origin to Geometry. This adjustment ensures that when we rotate or scale our crystal, it moves around its center, leading to more consistent results. Now that we've shaped our crystal, let's take a closer look at its edges. You might notice that they appear quite sharp and angular. While this can be desirable in some cases, to make our model more realistic and visually appealing, we need to add some subtle beveling to these edges to make them more natural. Beveling softens edges by adding small surfaces between intersecting faces. In reality, not many objects have perfectly sharp edges. Even sharp ones have a slight roundness when viewed closely. Beveling mimics this, enhancing the realism of our digital models. Moreover, beveled edges interact with light in a more complex and interesting way. They create subtle highlights and shadows that enhance the overall look of the model, making it appear more three-dimensional and giving it a more polished, finished appearance. Instead of adding bevels manually, which can be time-consuming and destructive, we'll use Blender's modifier system. Modifiers are like special effects for your 3D model. They let us do cool things to change the shape, but without messing up the original. That means you can tweak and experiment without worrying about starting over. To apply a bevel modifier to our crystal, first locate the Properties panel on the right side of the screen and find the Modifiers tab, which is represented by a small wrench icon. Once you click on this tab, you can add a modifier by selecting Add Modifier and then choosing Bevel from the drop-down list. This action will automatically add beveled edges to your model, resulting in a noticeable change where the sharp edges of your crystal will appear softer and more natural. Within the bevel modifier settings, you can adjust parameters such as the amount, which controls the width of the bevel. It's advisable to start with a small value, around 0.03, and make adjustments as needed. Additionally, you can modify the segments, which determines the smoothness of the bevel. More segments will yield a smoother bevel, but may also increase the model's complexity. Try starting with 3 or 4 segments. As you adjust these values, you'll see a real-time changes on your model. This immediate feedback is a great advantage of using modifiers. After applying the bevel modifier, you may notice some sharp lines on the surfaces of your crystal. These are called creases, and they indicate areas where the surface normals, the direction the surface is facing, change abruptly. Creases can be useful for defining sharp edges in your model, but in our case, we want a smoother look for our crystal. To make the surface smoother, exit Edit mode by pressing Tab to return to Object mode. With your crystal selected, right-click and choose Shade Smooth from the context menu. This operation tells Blender to interpolate the surface normals across faces, creating a smoother appearance. You should see a significant improvement in your crystal's look. You can also use Shade Auto Smooth for more control over the smoothing. This option works as a modifier in the Properties panel. The order of modifiers matters. They apply in the order they appear in the list, known as the modifier stack. Each modifier affects the previous ones, so the order can change your final model. For instance, applying a subdivision surface modifier before a bevel modifier will yield different results than the reverse. To reorder modifiers, click and drag them in the list. The smooth by angle modifier should always be at the bottom, affecting all previous modifiers. Another important note: in some cases you might notice that the bevel looks a bit strange, being disproportional in different axes, somewhere shorter or longer. This can happen if you have previously scaled your model disproportionately. You can check this in the Object Properties panel. If the scale values aren't all 1, this could be affecting your bevel. To fix this, ensure you're in Object mode and select your crystal. Then go to the Object menu at the top of the 3D viewport, choose Apply, and then Scale. Alternatively, use the shortcut Ctrl-A and select Scale. This operation applies the current scale to the object, resetting the scale values to 1. After this, your bevel modifier should work more predictably. One of the most powerful aspects of modifiers is their non-destructive nature. This means you can adjust them at any time, or even remove them completely, without affecting your original model. If you decide later that you want a sharper or softer bevel, you can simply come back to this modifier and adjust its settings. This flexibility is invaluable, especially as you are learning and experimenting with different looks for your crystal. The goal is to enhance the realism of your crystal without overdoing it. A subtle bevel can significantly improve your model's appearance. Take your time to experiment with the settings until you are satisfied with the result. Before exporting our crystal for After Effects, we must ensure it's set up correctly. This preparation is key for a smooth transition between software. Let's start with the bevel modifier. To keep editing options open, save your project and duplicate the model. You can do this by selecting Object, Duplicate Objects, or using the shortcut Shift+D. Move the duplicate slightly away from the center to keep your workspace tidy. Now focus on the modifiers. In the Modifiers tab, click the down arrow next to the bevel modifier and select Apply. This action commits the bevel to the mesh, making the beveled edges part of the geometry. If you added a smooth by angle modifier, apply that too. Next, it's good practice to reset the object's transformations if you haven't done so already. This step ensures that any scaling, rotation, or movement where applied doesn't cause issues when importing into other software. With the crystal selected, press Ctrl-A and choose All Transforms from the menu. This applies all transformations, effectively resetting the object's scale, rotation, and position data to their default values. Another step that could solve some possible issues is to fix normals. Normals are vectors that are perpendicular to the surface of your geometry and are crucial for determining how light interacts with your model. Properly oriented normals ensure that your crystal appears correctly lit and shaded in After Effects. If the normals are inverted or incorrectly oriented, it can lead to visual artifacts such as dark or incorrectly shaded areas on your model. To fix this, enter Edit mode, select all faces by pressing A. In the menu, go to Mesh, then Normals, and choose Recalculate Outside. You can also press Shift-N for a quick fix. Finally, give your object a clear name. In the outliner, double-click on the object's name and rename it to Crystal. This small detail matters as projects grow in complexity. Now that our crystal is ready, let's export it for After Effects. Make sure your crystal is selected. It should glow orange in the viewport. Navigate to the top menu and select File, then Export and choose GOTF 2.0 GLB GOTF. This format has recently gained support in After Effects and is an excellent choice for our purposes. It's an open format that's widely used across various applications, including Unity and Unreal Engine, making it a versatile option for 3D assets. The GOTF format has several advantages for our project. Embedded textures and materials. GOTF files can store all textures and material information within a single file. This means you don't have to worry about missing textures or linking multiple files during import. Physically based rendering support. GOTF supports PBR materials which simulate realistic lighting and material properties. This is crucial for achieving lifelike reflections, refractions, and surface details on your crystal model. Cross-platform capability. GOTF is widely supported across various 3D applications, making it easy to transfer assets between software without losing material and texture information. Optimized for web and real-time rendering, GOTF is designed to be lightweight and efficient, which speeds up loading times and performance within After Effects. The GOTF format comes in two variations, GLB and GOTF. For our export, we'll use the GOTF option. In the export settings, choose GOTF Separate as the format. This creates separate files for our geometry and textures, which can be more flexible for certain workflows in After Effects. Ensure Selected Objects is checked under the Include section. This way only your crystal gets exported, keeping your scene clean. You can leave the transform settings at their defaults, since we've already applied our transformations. In the mesh settings, there is an option to apply modifiers during export. While this can save time, the manual method we used earlier gives you more control and ensures everything looks right. Also check the Tangents option in the Data Match tab. This helps keep your normals oriented correctly. When saving your file, organize your project well. Create a new folder for your 3D assets in your project directory. This will help when we start working with materials later, as they should be in the same folder as the model for easy access. Name your file Crystal GOTF and save it in the Assets folder. Keeping a clear folder structure will make your workflow smoother as your project expands. With everything set, click Export GOTF 2.0 to finish the export. Your crystal is now ready for After Effects. Great job! You've modeled a crystal in Blender and prepared it for After Effects. You've learned to navigate Blender's interface, use basic modeling tools, and apply modifiers, marking your first step into 3D modeling. If you are not satisfied with the result, you can use our model that we provide in the lesson materials. In the next video, we'll import our crystal into After Effects and start building our scene. We'll set up lighting and animate our 3D objects to bring everything to life. See you there! Welcome back. Now it's time to bring our crystal model to life in After Effects. We'll walk through building an exciting scene step by step, and I'll show you some tips to keep things smooth and easy as we go. At this point, it's important to know the good practice of project organization. It will help us with further steps. After Effects works with elements in two ways. When we draw vector graphics, add text, or any default elements, it adds them directly into the created project. We can save it and share it with anyone, knowing that they will open it and see the same elements. But when we import files like images, videos, and 3D objects, it doesn't save them in the project file. It just references the files. This helps keep the project file small and organized. In the project panel, we can right-click on the image and press Reveal in Finder to find the original file. It's impossible to include the files in the project. We need to keep in mind that we always work with the original file somewhere on our computer. That's why it's a good practice to move the working files into the project folder. We won't be afraid that files from the desktop or downloads folders could be accidentally lost. All these things are important to know before working with 3D files in After Effects. After importing a 3D object, we need to make sure that we don't remove or relocate it later, because it will break the reference to the original file and we will see a broken image. Here is an example of project structure. The After Effects AEP file should be located in the lesson root folder, or even better, to locate it in the projects folder where we will collect all After Effects and Blender files. Assets folder needed for collecting support files like refs, videos, templates, and so on. Export folder will be needed for collecting renders and final files. Actually, even with such setup, you can share the project with 3D objects with others without breaking all reference links to files. In After Effects, we have a special function called Collect Files. We will come back to it at the end of the video. Let's start by importing the crystal model. Just double-click in the project panel or press Ctrl-I, Command-I on Mac, find your crystal GeoTF file, and press Import. You can also drag it straight into the project panel, whichever works best for you. Next, drag the model file onto the composition icon in the project panel. When working with 3D models, it's good practice to place them in a separate composition, but not necessary. After Effects will recognize this as a 3D object and display import settings. If everything went smoothly in Blender, we won't need any special adjustments. You should see the model appear in the scene, so go ahead and click OK. However, if the model seems too large or too small, you can use the object scale and make comp size functions to adjust it. The Effect Position option can help fix the model's position in the scene. Let's rename the new composition to Crystal and place it in the Pre-Comp folder. Keeping everything organized will enhance our workflow. Now that we have our crystal in After Effects, let's get familiar with the 3D space we'll be working in. If your composition includes a 3D layer, you'll notice the 3D icon on the layer is active. This means we are now in a 3D design animation space, similar to what we experienced in Blender. We have several camera tools: Orbit, Pan, and Dolly. These tools let us move around our scene and view our 3D objects from the different angles. It's like navigating in a virtual space. You can rotate around objects, move closer or further away, and shift your view up and down. To reset the camera view, go to View, Reset Default Camera. If you want to explore your scene without affecting the main camera, switch to a custom view from the bottom menu in the Viewer panel. This allows you to navigate freely without altering the camera settings for your final output. A handy tip: holding down Alt or Option on Mac temporarily switches your active tool to the camera tool. Click and drag in the viewer to rotate the camera around your object. To manipulate the model, use the 3D Transform gizmo. This tool helps you rotate, scale, and position 3D layers directly in the viewer. It's similar to the transform controls for 2D layers but expanded into 3 dimensions. After Effects has come a long way in handling 3D content. While it's primarily known as 2D tool, recent updates have significantly improved its 3D capabilities. To work effectively with 3D, it's important to understand the different 3D rendering engines available. In this course, we'll focus on the Advanced 3D Renderer, but let's briefly touch on the others. To see and select the rendering engine for your composition, go to Composition Settings and click on the 3D Renderer tab. Here you can choose between Classic 3D, Cinema 4D, and Advanced 3D. Each engine has its own strengths and limitations, which are listed in this panel. The Classic 3D Renderer is great for projects with 2D layers and basic 3D transformations. It's fast and stable but lacks advanced features like realistic lighting or shadows. The Cinema 4D Renderer was the previous choice for 3D work in After Effects. It allows for extruding shapes and text and adds more realistic 3D rendering capabilities. However, it may struggle with imported 3D models, especially those with complex materials. In my previous course, Motion Pro, we explored combining these engines to create pseudo 3D and stylized 3D models using the free Cinema 4D Lite version. It's a good combination, but for our current project, we have a better option. The Advanced 3D Renderer is the newest tool in After Effects. It's fast and works great for our crystal model. It gives us realistic lighting, shadows, and reflections. Plus, it lets us turn 2D layers into 3D similar to the Cinema 4D engine. For our project, the Advanced 3D Renderer is the best choice. It fully supports GOTF models and lets us leverage Blender's capabilities within After Effects. We'll also use environment lights for realistic image-based lighting and shadows with HDRI files. Don't worry if some of these terms are new, we'll explore them as we progress through the course. An interesting note: within a single project you can mix and match these renderers in different compositions. This flexibility allows you to utilize each engine's strength where they're most effective. Additionally, the Advanced 3D engine offers features like Draft 3D Preview, which lets you see real-time changes in your scene, speeding up your workflow. The 3D ground plane provides a reference for positioning your objects, and the extended view allows you to see content beyond the composition boundaries. One area where performance can be affected is shadow quality. High-quality shadows can be demanding on your system. To adjust shadow quality for better performance, navigate to Composition Settings and select the 3D Renderer option. Click on Options. Here you can modify the shadow map resolution, smoothness, and overall quality settings. Lowering these values can enhance performance during previews, while increasing them will improve the quality of the final render. For now, a render quality between 5–10 is enough, but for final renders, consider increasing it to 50 or higher. Let's return to our crystal and continue building our scene. We need to create spheres in addition to the crystal. Unfortunately, After Effects does not support creating simple 3D primitives natively. We'll try to create them using Super 3D. To ensure we cover all necessary steps from scratch, here are a few steps on how to make them from Blender. From the Add menu, select Mesh, and then UV Sphere. Set the shading to Smooth. To add some color, go to the Material tab and click New. This is sufficient for our first lesson. You can change the sphere's color in the base color property. If you don't see the new material color, change the viewport shading to Material Preview mode or Render Preview mode. We won't render with Blender engine, so the first option should be enough. To reduce blurriness, decrease the roughness value. In the next lesson, we will explore advanced techniques for creating textured materials. Ensure you'll apply all necessary steps from the previous lesson to prepare the model for export, and export it as a GeoTF model. For our animation, you can export a few spheres in different colors. Before we start animating, let's look at how to quickly create simple models like spheres without modeling them from scratch in Blender using Super 3D. If you prefer to practice more in Blender, feel free to note what we are doing to improve our workflow when possible. First, save your project to keep your assets organized. All new 3D model files from Super 3D will automatically be collected in the new root folder of the project. Establishing a structured hierarchy is a good practice for complex projects. In the Super 3D panel, you'll find various 3D primitives such as spheres, cubes, and cylinders from the basic set. Select the desired model on the left panel, material on the right panel, and click Create. If you want to change the material or the model itself, Super 3D simplifies this with its Replace function. Select the layer you want to modify, choose a new model or texture, and press Replace. If you only need to update the model or texture, you can deselect one of them. To adjust the material properties, select the sphere layer and click the Pause button, which looks like an arrow down icon at the top right corner of the Super 3D panel. This action loads the material settings for the selected model. In the material settings, you can modify the base color, metallic, and roughness properties similar to Blender. For instance, increasing the metallic slider gives the sphere a shiny, metal-like appearance, while adjusting roughness controls the surface's reflectivity. For the flying spheres around the crystal, we opted for a more reflective look. Choose the desired workflow for you. Super 3D is a good choice for quickly adding simple models. Before we continue, we need to know some important things about how After Effects works with 3D layers. When you duplicate a layer, such a simple 2D shape, it becomes a new independent object with its own transformations and styles. It is located inside the project file. However, when working with imported 3D files, duplicating a layer retains the 3D stylization for all objects. To create a second sphere, you need to start from scratch, duplicate the model file from the File Explorer, or use the Super 3D function for duplicating 3D objects. Select the layers and use the Duplicate function in the drop-down menu. Now you can change the color of the second sphere as desired. Now let's prepare the material for our crystal. Like before, we have two ways to do it. For the crystal styling from the promo video, we need reflective white material. In the Blender, we can use the same steps from sphere. Select the model, add new material, ensure that color is white, increase metallic to 1 and make the roughness to 0.5. It's easy. Alternatively, we can use the widget. Select the crystal layer and press the Pause button. You'll notice that it doesn't have any material assigned. Choose the glass white material from the list and press the button. If the changes don't appear immediately, locate the model file in the project panel, right-click on it and select Reload Footage. Base color is already white for clear reflection of the environment. Make metallic 1 and roughness 0.5. Rotate the model to observe how the light interacts with the new material, revealing subtle textures on the crystal's surface that enhance its realism. We will explore how to add such textures in Blender in the next lesson. If your background is black like mine, let's press Toggle Transparency Grid to show the light grid in the viewer. This grid displays the transparent areas of the composition. For now, let's hide the sphere to focus on the crystal. Instead of rushing to duplicate and place objects around the crystal, as we did in the initial draft, let's take a moment to consider motion and how we'll animate these elements together. Now let's bring our scene to life by adding some animation. We'll start with a simple example to understand the basics of animating in After Effects, and then apply those concepts to our crystal and spheres. In After Effects, animation involves setting keyframes for properties like position, rotation, or scale. Keyframes indicate where changes start and end, and After Effects fills in the motion between them. Let's start with a simple example using a cube. We'll animate a cube moving from the left to the right side of the screen. Unfold the layer transform properties or just select the cube layer and press P to reveal the position property. Move the time indicator to the start of the timeline at 0 seconds and click the stopwatch icon next to position to create a keyframe. Then move the time indicator to 2 seconds and drag the cube to the right or adjust the position values. A new keyframe appears automatically. Now scrub through the timeline or press the spacebar to preview. You'll see the cube moving linearly from left to right. The default keyframes we added are linear keyframes, represented by diamond shapes in the timeline, which create constant motion between points. You can drag your keyframes left or right in the timeline to adjust when things happen. We can smooth out the movement by adjusting the keyframes. To do this, select all the keyframes and press F9 to apply Easy Ease. Alternatively, you can right-click on the selected keyframes, go to Keyframe Assistant, and choose Easy Ease. This adds gradual acceleration and deceleration to the movement, making it feel more natural. It's like the cube is taking a breath before it starts moving and gently coming to a stop at the end. It adds some physics to the movement, making the motion more natural. You can revert keyframes to linear by holding Ctrl or Command on Mac and clicking the keyframe. In the viewer, you'll notice the motion path, the direction of the layer's movement. The dashes show the layer's position at each frame. To make the movement more dynamic, we can curve the motion path. Select the pen tool, click on the start or end position and drag the mouse in a direction. You'll see the curve on the motion path. Play back the animation to observe the smooth movement. We can refine the smoothness of these movements using the graph editor, but let's keep it simple for now. We'll explore that in the next lesson. For now, this covers the essentials of position animation. Let's go back to our crystal and make simple rotation animation. Let's get the scene ready. Start by placing the crystal composition into the main scene. Instead of rotating the crystal directly, it's easier to animate the whole composition. This keeps things organized and makes model management much easier. If we add keyframes directly to the layers, any changes in position or scale will require us to adjust the keyframes each time. Using a pre-comp allows us to separate animation from model control. If you create another modification of the crystal, you can easily replace it in the crystal composition without affecting the animation. Now, to rotate the composition in 3D space, we need to enable the 3D layer switch in the layer panel. It will add 3D properties to the layer. But you will notice that the crystal is flat if we try to rotate it. To ensure proper functionality, locate the Collapse Transformation switch, which looks like a sun icon, and click it for your pre-comp layer. It's a way of putting the layers back to the composition, but inside the 3D box that groups all layers together. For example, if I try to duplicate the crystal inside the composition, In the parent composition, we still see one layer with an increased boundary box. We will move and rotate all objects at once around the layer's center. Now we can animate the crystal. Select the crystal layer and press R to reveal the rotation properties. Move the time indicator to the start of the timeline at 0 seconds and click the stopwatch icon next to Y rotation to create a keyframe. Then move the time indicator to 4 seconds and set the Y rotation to 360 degrees. This creates a full rotation over 4 seconds. This rotation property has two values. The first is the amount of turns, and the second is a precise degree. So 360 degrees is one turn. The second value will reset to 0. Animating in 3D space can be more challenging than in 2D. In our animation, the spheres orbit around the crystal from bottom to top. At first glance, it might seem that we need to animate the position of each sphere individually by adjusting the curved motion path, but that's not an efficient way to work. It requires significant experience to make it look natural. Fortunately, there is an easier and faster method. To make our animation easier, we'll use null objects as control points of the spheres. This method helps manage layers and animations similar to how we handled the crystal composition. Let's quickly go over how this works. Instead of animating the spheres directly, we create an invisible null object and link the spheres to it. This null object acts like a puppet master controlling the movements of the spheres. By moving the spheres away from the null object's center, we can change their orbit radius. When we rotate the null, the spheres will spin around it just like planets orbiting the Sun. By moving and rotating the null object simultaneously, we can achieve intricate spiral animations that create smooth and precise orbiting motions, which can be challenging to replicate manually. We can actually achieve this without a null object by adjusting the anchor point of the 3D layer. This method moves the object further from the center and increases the rotation radius. However, there is a catch. Scaling the object also affects its position relative to the center. When you change the scale, it not only alters the size but also shifts the object back toward the center. Using a null object resolves this issue. It allows us to animate position, rotation, and scale independently. More advanced workflows often involve multiple nulls connected to each other, enabling complex movements that are difficult to achieve manually. We will master this workflow throughout the course. Let's align the crystal and the sphere. First, press P on the crystal layer to reveal its position. Copy the values using Ctrl+C or Command+C on Mac. Now select the sphere and press P again to show its position property. Paste the values with Ctrl+V or Command+V on Mac. This aligns the sphere with the crystal. Next, move the sphere to the right, positioning it close to the crystal. Create a null object by going to Layer and selecting New, then Null Object. Turn on the 3D switch for this new layer. Position the null at the center of the crystal by copying the crystal's position values and pasting them onto the null object's position. Next, parent a sphere to the null object. Select the sphere layer and choose the null object from the Parent and Link dropdown. This way, any changes made to the null will also affect the sphere. Select the null object and press R to reveal the rotation properties. Set keyframes for the Y rotation. At 0 seconds, set the rotation to -90 degrees to hide the sphere behind the crystal. At 4 seconds, adjust the rotation value to complete a full turn. This will make the sphere orbit around the crystal in 4 seconds. Now, let's add vertical movement to the sphere. Create keyframes on the null object at the same times. Start by moving the null object lower. Then, at the end, move it up to the top of the crystal, but not too high, so sphere stays hidden. Take a look at the animation. It looks great. We've created an effect of appearing and disappearing. We don't need to create new keyframes for each additional sphere. Just duplicate the layers. Then offset the layers in the timeline to create space between their animations. Duplicate the connected sphere with the null. Move them higher in the Layers panel for better organization. Then shift the layers in the timeline by a few frames and watch the magic happen. This adds space between them and creates an animation sequence. For now, the animation feels slow. Let's reduce the duration to 2 seconds. This allows us to add more spheres and finish their movement by 4 seconds. Now we can modify the sphere to make it look different. Remember, we're working with 3D files. Changing the scale is easy since it's just a layer value. To change the color, request a new model or duplicate the file on your computer and replace it in the project. To simplify this, use the Super 3D widget. Select the sphere layer and press the Duplicate button. This automatically creates a new file and imports it into the composition in the same position, allowing you to delete the old layer. Then pause the file in Super 3D and change the base color. Let's repeat these steps until the timeline is filled with moving spheres. Each sphere will have a different color and size, making the animation more interesting. Try to create a wide range of scales for the spheres. A combination of large and small spheres looks better. Adding small details makes the crystal seem bigger than it is. Just try to notice the difference between a simple ball and a planet. Or try placing a small human model into the composition to feel the difference. A planet has incredible details with a wide range of small and big silhouettes. We don't need an epic planet scale, just beautiful texture details on the crystal, and a small object to create a great contrast that enhances human perception of the image. Cool. The last step for the promo video is to add the largest sphere moving before the others. Instead of fully disappearing, it should smoothly stop at the top of the crystal. In the next lesson, we'll add more movement to morph it into another model to make a transition. The basic animation will remain the same, just make it larger and offset the rest of the animation to increase the distance between the spheres so they don't collide. It will stop slightly higher than the others. For this, move the time indicator to the second position keyframe and decrease the y-axis value to move it higher. Alternatively, you can just move the layer higher in the viewer. Just make sure you are located exactly at the keyframe. Otherwise, you will create a new keyframe that we don't need. For a smooth stop, apply Easy Ease to the second keyframe by pressing F9. This gives a motion a natural feel with smooth deceleration. This is a great result for the first lesson and draft animation. If the spheres are too large, that could be visible at the start. You can add scale animation to hide them in the beginning, gradually increasing to their initial size. The second keyframe should be Easy Ease for a smooth stop. To make the sphere animation more closely resemble to the promo video version, we can increase the rotation by one more turn. The animation will be much faster for the same number of frames, so we need to move the second frame further to the right until the end of the animation. Here is one more tip to polish the animation. The crystal isn't uniform. Its radius decreases closer to the top and bottom. Our current animation resembles a perfect cylinder. To make it feel like the spheres are moving closer to the crystal's surface, we can add extra position movement to the spheres. They should start closer, move farther away in the middle of the animation, and then come closer again at the end. We need to adjust the x-axis position of the spheres. The rest of the animations will follow the Null's movement. This is an example of combining animations of connected layers to create a more complex animation that is easy to adjust and modify. It requires some preparation, but in the end, it's flexible and modifiable. Ideally, we should add scale and position animations in a new null object that will link to our first null. This makes it easier to adjust the model later. For now, let's keep it simple. Now let's shift our focus to a new topic, styling our scene with lighting. Let's brighten our scene with some dynamic lighting. You may have noticed in the promo video how the crystal bursts with colors. We can create this effect using environment lighting techniques. The advanced 3D engine in After Effects has a handy tool called Environment Light. This light source gives us realistic lighting and works with the advanced 3D renderer. To add an environment light, make right-click on the Layers panel and select the new light. Choose Environment Light from the options. Under the hood, environment lights use HDRI images. HDRI, or High Dynamic Range Images maps, are like 360-degree photos packed with lighting information. They help create realistic reflections and lighting, giving our scene more depth and realism. Here's how it works. By default, After Effects uses a hidden HDRI studio map. This map gives a basic studio-like lighting setup. To see this hidden map, add a 3D sphere to your scene and apply a reflective material. You'll notice the reflection of a studio environment lighting your scene. While this default map is a good start, we can enhance our lighting with custom HDRI maps. Let's start by rotating the default environment light to see how it affects the scene. Notice how the lighting and reflections change as you adjust the rotation. Now let's try a custom HDRI map. You can find free HDRI resources online. I'll provide some links in the course materials. Once you've downloaded an HDRI map, import it into your project. In the light options for your environment light, find the source drop-down and select your imported HDRI file. Watch how this instantly transforms the lighting in your scene. If you don't see immediate changes, don't worry. After Effects may need a moment to render the new lighting. You'll see a blue progress bar as it works. If it's slow, switch to Draft 3D mode in the viewer. This speeds up your workflow without losing much quality, but shadows will be disabled in this mode. To fine-tune the lighting, adjust the environment light settings. This controls the overall brightness, shadow darkness, and softness of shadow edges for a more natural look. While pre-made HDRI maps are great, they may not resemble our crystal. Let's create our own custom HDRI map. Create a new composition named Custom HDRI. The settings can be the same as we used before for the scenes, but it is better to set it to 4K resolution for better image quality. We don't need a specific frame rate, as we will only get one frame from it. First, we need a base to work on. Go to Layer, then New and select Solid. This will create a solid color layer that fills our composition. The color doesn't matter as we'll be applying effects to it. Next, we need to add our main effect. If you don't see the Effects and Presets panel, go to Window in the top menu, then select Effects and Presets. This panel is where you'll find all the effects we can use in After Effects. In the Effects and Presets panel, type VR Control Gradient in the search bar. You'll find this effect in the Immersive Video group. Click and drag this effect onto your solid layer. You should now see the effect appear in the Effect Controls panel for your layer. If you don't see this panel, you can open it by going to Window, then selecting Effect Controls. The VR Control Gradient effect is unique because it creates seamless 360-degree gradients. Unlike simpler effects, this one warps around perfectly, making it ideal for HDRI maps. In the Effect Controls, you'll see options for color points. Each point represents a light source in our HDRI. You can adjust the number of points, their positions, and colors to create different lighting scenarios. Move these points around and see how they affect your gradient. You can create interesting lighting setups this way. Let's use our reference image to get the exact colors we want. With the eyedropper tool selected, hover over any part of the After Effects interface to pick colors. Sample colors from our reference and apply them to your gradient points. We're creating a lighting environment here. Think about where you want your main light sources. Maybe a bright spot for your key light, softer areas for fill, and darker area for contrast. At the bottom of the HDRI map, I added a floor area with dark blue color. It's easy to create with the help of the rectangle tool. At the top, press the Fill Color thumbnail to change the shape's color. A bit later, we will export this composition as an HDRI map and apply it to our environment light. After that, it will be more evident how the lights could be adjusted. This method gives us control over lighting environment. Before rendering our HDRI map, we need to make an important change. Our project is set to 16-bit color depth, which won't capture the full light range we need. Switch to 32-bit color depth by going to File, then Project Settings, and changing the color depth to 32 bits per channel. This change is crucial for an effective HDRI map, allowing us to capture a wider range of light values. Next, let's enhance the light's brightness with a new effect. Go back to the Effects panel and add an exposure effect to your HDRI composition. Now that we have two layers, to add the effect that will apply to all layers in the composition, we need to use an adjustment layer. Right-click on the Layer panel and select New Adjustment Layer. Drag and drop the effect onto the adjustment layer. The adjustment layer will affect all layers beneath it. Increase the exposure value to about 1.3. It might look too bright in the viewer, but it will provide the light range we need for our 3D scene. Changing the order of adjustment layer will change the layers it affects. We're covering some complex topics with color depth and exposure, but don't worry if it feels technical. These steps help create a realistic and dynamic lighting environment. We'll explore these details in the future lessons, so just follow along and you'll see the difference in our final render. Now that we've created our custom HDRI map, let's see how it works in our scene. We need to export our HDRI composition as a single frame. This is our first time using After Effects rendering capabilities, so let's walk through it. Go to the Composition menu at the top and select Save Frame as File. This opens the Render Queue panel at the bottom of your workspace, where After Effects manages rendering tasks. You'll see your HDRI composition added to the render queue. We need to check the settings for our HDRI map. Click on Output module in the Render Queue panel to choose our export settings. In the Format dropdown, select Open EXR sequence. After Effects can save directly in HDRI format, but OpenEXR is the next best option. EXR files support 32 bits channels, essential for HDRI maps. This allows us to capture a wider brightness range, helping achieve realistic lighting and reflections. After Effects now supports EXR files for environment lights, which we need. Next, set our render quality. Click on Render Settings in the Render Queue panel and select Best Settings. This ensures we get the highest quality for our HDRI map. Now, choose where to save your file. Click on the file name next to Output 2 and navigate to your project folder. Name your file Custom HDRI Map EXR. With these settings ready, we're set to render. Click the Render button in the Render Queue panel. You'll see a progress bar as After Effects creates your HDRI map. Since we're rendering a single frame, this should be quick. Once the render is complete, we can use this custom HDRI map in our main scene. Import your new EXR file back into your project and composition. Apply this new map to your environment light, just like we did with the pre-made HDRI. Now the crystal with spheres should look much better, reflecting the colors of the HDRI map. If your result doesn't look improved, try using our pre-made HDRI map from the project. We've also added a composition of the source image in the project so you can adjust your HDRI. For the project, I created a more complex HDRI map with extra effects. In addition to the gradient, floor color, and exposure, I added a color correction effect to make the colors a bit darker, without too many white areas, chromatic aberrations to add some cool blending colors, and a displacement effect to add some variations to the colors area. Our version is a great start for the first lesson. We'll explore these effects in a more depth in the next lessons. Remember to switch back to 16-bit color depth for your main composition after creating your HDRI map. While 32-bit gives us more light range, it can slow down rendering. While environment lights create overall illumination, sometimes we want more control over specific areas of our scene. This is where traditional light types come in handy. After Effects offers various light types to illuminate your scene. Right-click in the Layers panel and select Layer New Light. Let's start with a spotlight. Think of a spotlight as a stage spotlight. To direct it, adjust its point of interest. A quick way to focus it on our crystal is to copy the crystal's position values and paste them into the light's point of interest. Feel free to play around with the light's position. Switch to Custom View at the bottom of the viewer and use the Orbit tool to explore your scene. You may want to boost the light's intensity. Remember, the intensity changes based on how far the light is from objects, its direction, and the shape of its cone. There are other light types that serve as variations of the spotlight. You can change the light type by double-clicking on the light layer. A point light emits light uniformly in all directions from a single point, like a Bay light bulb. The parallel light emits parallel rays of light in one direction, resembling sunlight. An ambient light provides uniform illumination without casting shadows, ensuring all objects are lit evenly. In this scene, I don't rely on additional lights for significant changes. Instead, model bevels play a crucial role. Looking at the reference, you'll notice white highlights along the face boundaries. These highlights can be created using bevels. As the crystal rotates, bevels interact with light sources at specific angles, causing them to shine for a few frames. This adds interest and realism to the image. I added a few more lights at certain angles, ensuring their intensity is noticeable, but not overwhelming to avoid drawing unnecessary attention. Finding the right balance is crucial for effective lighting. Your environment light sets the base illumination and reflections, while additional lights add depth and character. Tweak the intensity and color of each light source until you find a look that resonates with you. Don't hesitate to adjust your custom HDRI or reposition your accent lights. Lighting is a process of trial and error, and even small tweaks can lead to big changes. If you feel overwhelmed with all the new possibilities, feel free to use our pre-made scene lights setup. You can copy and paste the lights into your scene. To move all lights together, select them and use the 3D Gizmo tool to move them at once. Or create a new null object, make it a 3D layer, parent all lights to it, and control their position by moving one null. Let's put the final touches on our scene. We'll start by adding a background that complements our 3D elements. Create a new shape layer or solid, and choose a background color that matches your reference or enhances the overall mood. This simple addition can dramatically improve the atmosphere and make your 3D elements pop. Now take a moment to review everything. Press the spacebar to play back your composition. Watch it closely. Don't hesitate to make small adjustments to timing or positioning. Sometimes even tiny tweaks can change the feel of your animation. To be honest, I don't really like the material on the spheres for now. The reflections on them are too sharp. To make them more like in the promo, we can decrease the metallic a bit and increase the roughness close to 1. The texture on the crystal could be less noticeable. It requires some tricks with the texture images. These techniques we will cover in the next lessons. Our composition is 26 seconds long. If we try to render it, it will save all 26 seconds, but we need only 4 seconds. We have a few options for how to do this. Firstly, we can change the work area by manually moving the start and end handles, or by using the N and B keys to set the start and end frames depending on the time indicator position. This limits the preview and render duration, making it a good way for fast testing. For better organization, we can create a scene pre-compose that will contain all our elements. Let's make it 6 seconds long to reserve some time for the transition to the next scene. I'll delete the unused layers. Select all layers of the first scene and press Alt plus right square bracket to cut the ends of the layers. This will help create a shorter composition. Right-click on the selected layers and select Pre-compose. Here we can set a name for the new composition. We have a few options for creating pre-comps for different cases, but for now, we have only one option enabled. Set the toggle Adjust Composition Duration to make the composition duration exactly the same as the longest selected layer. Great, now we can set a 4-second work area in the new composition and we are ready to render it. Head to Composition and select Add to Render Queue. Your composition will show up in the Render Queue panel ready for output. For the best quality, click on Best Settings in the Render Settings column. This ensures you're using the highest quality settings including full resolution and all effects. For the output module settings, we'll use the high quality template, which uses ProRes 422. This professional-grade codec is fantastic for preserving the details and colors of your composition. It strikes a great balance between quality and file size. ProRes 422 is an industry standard optimized for smooth playback and compatible with most editing software. This makes it ideal if you plan to do any further post-production work. Remember, ProRes files can be large and take up space. If you need a smaller file, you can render to MP4 instead. The quality won't be as high, but it's a good option for sharing your work easily. To finish your render, select where to save your file by clicking on the file name next to Output 2. Once you're happy with your settings, hit the render button and watch After Effects bring your creation to life. Don't be disappointed if the final result looks different from our reference. It's just the beginning, and we have a lot of work to do to make it look better with our new knowledge. Rendering 3D scenes can be time-consuming. If you need to speed things up, try decreasing the render resolution. You can do this by going to Composition Settings, then 3D Renderer, and changing the resolution to a lower value. Just remember, lower resolutions might impact the quality of your renders, so you may need to tweak other settings to maintain the look you want. Currently, the Advanced 3D Engine is a new feature in After Effects, and sometimes there can be issues with displaying models. Additionally, after working on the project for some time, you might notice significant performance issues that occur from time to time. From the Edit, Purge menu, there are functions to help with this. After Effects processes working files and collects cache material in its own folders for better performance and efficiency. However, this doesn't always work perfectly. We can clean up the cache or RAM memory, which helps in most cases. Cleaning the 3D models cache can also help with some issues. Another thing about export. Before I mentioned that we can help with issues when sending the project file with 3D models. Here are more details. Before sending the project to anyone, you need to collect all linked files in one place. For this, we have a function located in the menu File, Dependencies, Collect Files. Basically, you just need to press the Collect button and select the folder where you want to save all the files. All linked files in the project will be saved in the selected folder. But it will have a different folder structure, so we usually use this function only when we need to send the project to someone or archive the project. After applying the function, your current project will be reopened. Before collecting the project, there is a good practice to reduce the project size by deleting all unnecessary and unused files, compositions, and layers. After Effects also has a special function for this action. In the project panel, you need to select all material you need to keep. From the menu File, Dependencies, choose Reduce Project. After Effects will scan all nested compositions and remove anything not used in the selected compositions. 3D models could include heavy texture files, so this is a good way to minimize the project size. After this step, you can collect the project. For users of After Effects 2024, there is an important note regarding 3D model textures. While these textures typically appear automatically upon importing models, this isn't always guaranteed. In some cases, you might need to reload the model to ensure the textures appear correctly. This step is crucial when reducing and collecting projects. If they are not showing up in the project panel, the collect function won't include them in the new location. Therefore, it's essential to double-check your 3D folders. Our Super 3D function can be particularly helpful in this situation. If you don't select anything in the composition, or if you hold the Alt key and click the Reload button, the script will automatically locate and reload every model file. While this might cause the models to cache again, it ensures that all textures are visible. This extra step isn't necessary in After Effects 2025. In this newer version, the developers have chosen to hide the texture files from the project panel. And there you have it. We've taken the crystal from Blender, brought it into After Effects, and built a dynamic 3D scene around it. We've covered a lot, from importing 3D models to creating custom lighting with HDRI maps, and finally rendering our scene. This is just the start of what you can do with 3D in After Effects. In our next lesson, we'll explore materials and animation further. We'll learn how to create and apply complex materials and fine-tune the look of our scene. Remember, great 3D work comes from experimentation and practice. Don't hesitate to play with the techniques we've covered today. You might find some exciting new effects. Thanks for joining me on this 3D journey. I can't wait to see what you create with these techniques. Until next time, keep creating and enjoy After Effects and Blender.